The wind screamed across the dust-choked plains of Drexenfor, a ghost world where the sun never smiled and the air bit like iron. Ash swirled in sepia spirals, masking everything in a blur of soot and silence. But she kept running. Her name was Lyra, though no one had called her that in weeks. Barefoot and bleeding, she stumbled through the cracked canyon walls like a dying animal, her breath catching in ragged gasps. Plasma burns seared her shoulder and thigh, sticky and wet. The child's eyes, once green and bright, were dull now, unfocused with exhaustion and fear. Behind her came the hunters. 6 figures marched in silent formation, black armor glinting with imperial sigils, boots crunching the dry earth. At their head strode Captain Rowan Blackwell, tall, broad-shouldered, and lethal in the way of a blade that had never once dulled. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His squad knew what he expected. Results, no questions, no survivors. They'd been chasing the girl for hours. She wasn't supposed to be alive. According to mission intel, she had been killed with her escort in the initial sweep. A surgical strike, the Empire said, swift and clean. But she ran. Blackwell watched her from atop a rocky ridge, visor zoomed in. There was something unnatural about her endurance. A child should have collapsed hours ago, especially after being shot. His lips pressed into a hard line. He tapped his wrist pad. Target is still moving. Tired. Bleeding. No backup signatures detected, came the tech's voice through comms. Orders. Blackwell's voice was like steel dragged across bone. Terminate her. Now. The squad moved in. One flanked her from the left, another dropped from a ledge to her right. She darted between jagged rocks, scraping her hands raw. A boot caught her ribcage and hurled her to the ground. Her scream tore through the wind. A rifle rose. The energy core glowed. Then came 7 flashes of light. 1, 2, 3, each one punctuating the stillness like a drumbeat of death. By the 7th, her body lay still, splayed across the dirt like a broken doll. The men stood over her in silence, waiting. Blackwell arrived last, knelt beside her, and scanned her vitals. No pulse. Good. He turned without a word, and the squad marched off, shadows dissolving into the storm. Hours passed. The ash continued to fall. In the ruins of an old Terran communications tower, a man watched the scene unfold on a cracked surveillance monitor. He'd been tracking the girl for days, ever since he'd intercepted an encrypted message bearing her genetic code. His name was Elias Varn, once a combat medic in the Terran uprising, now a scavenger and ghost among the stars. He moved with urgency, loading his med bag, grabbing stimulants and ancient Terran nanites salvaged from a forgotten war. His legs ached from age and injury, but he didn't hesitate. The girl was still warm. He believed that with an irrational certainty he hadn't felt since the last Terran flag was burned. He reached her just before nightfall. Her body was riddled with plasma scorches. Her pulse was barely perceptible, but it was there. Varn worked like a surgeon possessed. He injected her with cryoserum, patched her wounds with biogel, slipped the neural stabilizer into the base of her skull. He murmured to her, not prayers, but memories. You're going to be all right. I won't let them take you. He didn't know who she was, but in her face, he saw something he hadn't seen since the war. A trace of someone long thought dead. A shadow of a man who disappeared after the Terran collapse, rumors whispered across galaxies, in soldier barracks and enemy war councils alike. The girl stirred. Her lips parted, cracked and trembling. The word she said was not a cry for help, nor a plea for mercy. It was a name. John. Varn's hands froze. There was only one John she could mean. One name feared across every Empire-controlled system. One man who didn't just kill, he ended things. John Killian, the American Boogeyman. Varn looked at the girl again, this time with horror wrapped in awe. It wasn't possible. Killian had disappeared over a decade ago. The files said he died during the siege of Tranquility Base. But Varn had never believed them. Killian wouldn't die quietly. And now here was this girl. Shot 7 times. Alive. Whispering his name like a prayer or a trigger word. Varn activated his old transmitter, dusty, barely functional. He hadn't used it in years, not since the war ended. He keyed in the ancient encryption pattern, the one known only to the Ghost Protocol. This is Varn, he said. If you're out there, if you can hear this, she's alive. She said your name. He paused, looking down at her again. She shouldn't have survived. But she did. They're going to come back for her. And when they do, I won't be able to stop them alone. He pressed send. Thousands of light years away, in the hollowed-out corpse of a derelict Terran battlecruiser, a motion sensor blinked green. Deep within the ship's core, sealed behind layers of forgotten steel, a cryopod hummed softly. A biometric lock read the signal. It matched. The pod hissed open. A man sat up slowly, breath misting in the frigid air. His body bore the scars of wars no history book would dare record. Muscles coiled like waiting serpents, eyes dark and unflinching. He heard the message on a loop. She said your name. He stood, bare feet touching the ice-covered floor, walked to a metal case bolted to the wall, and opened it. Inside, Terran Black Ops armor, matte black with the old flag etched on the shoulder. His name engraved on the chest plate. Killian. He ran his hand across it. The rage returned, slow and familiar, like the memory of pain. Someone had shot a child. Not just any child, a girl who carried his legacy in her blood. John Killian suited up in silence. He checked his weapons, loaded every magazine, calibrated every sight. Then he looked into the mirror. For a long time, there had been nothing there but a reflection of a man who wanted to disappear. Now something else stared back. Purpose. Revenge. A promise. He stepped into the shadows of the hallway, the lights flickering behind him. The war wasn't over. It had just been sleeping. And now, the Boogeyman was awake. Governor Cyrus Delane stared at the hologram with bloodless eyes, tapping his ringed finger against the armrest of his throne-like command chair. The girl was still alive. Somehow. The data feed didn't lie. Transmission logs, unauthorized biosignals, and faint Terran encryption echo traced back to the ruins of Sector 9. He didn't blink. His left eye, cybernetic and crimson, magnified the details, stabilization spikes, a Terran signature flare, and a whisper of something far worse buried in the neural scan. A name. John Killian. He turned slowly to Captain Rowan Blackwell, who stood at parade rest like a statue of iron. Did you confirm the kill? Blackwell's jaw tensed. We triple verified. No pulse. Direct chest and cranial trauma. She was clinically dead when we left. And yet, here she is. Reanimated. Shielded by someone using off-grid Terran tech. That suggests two things, Captain. Delane stood, his silk-black robes rustling like dead leaves. First, you failed. Second, the shadows are moving again. Blackwell didn't flinch, though a single vein pulsed in his temple. Give the order. I'll erase whatever mistake this is. Personally. No, Delane said, pacing toward the galactic map hovering beside them. We don't just erase mistakes anymore. Not when ghosts are involved. We neutralize the threat entirely. He tapped a red-lit point on the map. Send a Phantom squad to Drexen 4. Covert entry. Burn the entire grid. No witnesses. Recover the girl's body, or what's left of it. And Captain, he turned his gaze like a scalpel. If you see him, run. Blackwell's lips curled into something close to a smirk. If he's alive, I'll bury him myself. Delane said nothing. He just walked back to his seat, staring into the void beyond the viewport. The name, Killian, echoed like a fracture in the hull of an empire already rusting beneath its polished surface. Light years away, deep within an asteroid belt choked with debris and the wreckage of forgotten wars, John Killian drifted in the shadows aboard the Obsidian Hound. The stealth-class gunship had been mothballed for years, cloaked in astromagnetic dust to evade even the most persistent scans. But now its systems thrummed with purpose. Inside the cabin, John sat in silence, a thick datapad glowing softly in his lap. Lyra's medical files scrolled upward, genetic logs, growth accelerants, partial neural imprinting. She wasn't just a child. She was engineered, designed, a weapon of peace or war, depending on who held the leash. But she was built from him. His DNA was the foundation, spliced and shaped by Terran scientists who had long since vanished. According to the data, Lyra had been part of the Phoenix Accord, a diplomatic experiment meant to prove that Terran and Imperial cooperation could be achieved by crafting a shared symbol, a child born of war, raised for unity. They never gave her a chance. John's thumb hovered over a section of redacted logs. Access denied. Even with his clearance, even with backdoor decryption protocols, the files resisted. Someone powerful didn't want this truth seen. That only made him more determined. He slid the datapad aside and stood, pacing the narrow metal corridor. Every movement betrayed the weight of 1,000 ghosts, muscles groaned, scars itched, and somewhere in the hollows of his chest, something fragile stirred. He hadn't felt this alive in years. He opened a weapons crate bolted to the wall. Inside lay a symphony of violence, a Terran hand cannon, polished black with etched kill marks, a rail blade that folded into his arm guard, a modular rifle calibrated for silent kills. Each piece he assembled with a ritualistic calm. The girl had called to him. Not just with her voice, but with something deeper, some encoded signal buried in her neural map. It wasn't random. It was a trigger. And it had worked. He activated the ship's autopilot, set the course for Drexen 4, and entered the forward chamber, where the armor waited. Its surface was dull, scraped by time and rusted memories. But it still fit like it had been waiting for him. He looked into the mirror again. Not a soldier now. Not a hero. Something older. Meaner. A legend carved into fear. Somewhere on that barren planet, a child with his blood was bleeding. And he was going to paint the sky red for her. On Drexen 4, Elias Varn moved Lyra deeper into the catacombs beneath the old Terran listening post. The air stank of sulfur and machine oil, but it was the only place the Empire wouldn't think to look. Yet, Lyra was unconscious, but stable. The stimulants were working. Her body, adapted for accelerated healing, had begun mending faster than any normal human should. Still, the damage had been catastrophic. Her bones were knitting. Her heart was sluggish but steady. Her neural activity was spiking with strange waves, patterns Varn had only seen once before years ago in captured telemetry during the siege of Atlas Prime. He didn't like what it meant, but he liked the alternative less. She murmured again in her sleep. Not words this time, but fragmented sounds. Gunfire. Screams. Echoes of things she couldn't possibly remember. Project Ghostfire, he thought. That's what they called it. A genetic experiment buried under 1,000 layers of red tape designed to resurrect the perfect soldier. But Killian had vanished before the project was complete. They must have tried to finish it without him. And this girl was the result. He watched her twitch and breathe and struggle against dreams too big for her small frame. I hope to hell he gets here in time, Varn muttered. Because if he doesn't, they'll send monsters. And I'm just a man. Above them, storm clouds roiled. The Empire's shuttle entered orbit without warning, silent, sleek, deadly. Aboard were 5 soldiers, faces hidden by black visors, armor laced with psychic dampeners and thermal cloaks. The Phantom Unit, the best of the best. Killers trained not just in war, but in erasure. Their orders were simple. Burn the post. Recover the girl. Leave no bodies. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ruins. Lightning crackled in the distance, turning the red sky to fire. Far from the chaos, unseen even by the Empire's omniscient eye, the Obsidian Hound approached Drexen's orbit, cloaked and silent. Inside, John Killian sat, hands clenched around the throttle. You shot her 7 times, he said to no one. Now I'm coming for 7 of yours. He leaned forward as the ship's systems locked onto the Phantom's signal below. And he smiled. The first warning came as a flicker in the power grid, a barely perceptible stutter in the lights that lined the ancient catacomb walls. Elias Varn paused mid-suture, his gloved hands steady despite the sudden tremor that vibrated through the concrete floor. Something had breached the outer perimeter. But no alarm sounded. No motion sensors tripped. Whatever was coming, it moved like a phantom in the dark. He turned toward Lyra, still unconscious, her breaths shallow and rhythmic. Her skin had regained some color, and the regenerative implants embedded in her bloodstream pulsed faintly beneath the surface. She was healing, but not fast enough. Varn rose to his feet, grabbed his sidearm, and headed toward the upper tunnel. He tapped the earpiece wired into his makeshift comms rig, broadcasting a narrowband signal to the only man who might still be listening. Killian, if you're in orbit, they're already here. Phantoms. 5, maybe more. I won't hold them off for long. He didn't wait for a response. He knew better than to expect one. Above, the phantoms moved through the ruins like whispers on silk. No footsteps, no chatter, just the mechanical rhythm of death closing in. They fanned out, thermal scanners sweeping the terrain, pulse rifles raised. The lead operative, call sign Echo 7, knelt beside a discarded med-wrap, still damp with blood. She's alive, he muttered into the comm. Target. Close. Below. The squad descended silently. By the time Varn reached the top level, the first 2 phantoms were already in the corridor, weapons raised. He fired before they could lock on, his old Terran blaster spitting blue light. One dropped, a sizzling hole punched clean through his visor. The second returned fire, grazing Varn's arm and sending him stumbling behind a steel column. He didn't panic. He'd seen worse, fought worse. But this wasn't a battle he could win alone. A moment later, the lights died completely. Darkness devoured the tunnel. Then a sound, soft, deliberate footsteps, echoing where none should have been. The remaining phantoms froze, recalibrating sensors, switching to ultraviolet. A shadow passed between them. One screamed. Then silence. Another turned to find his partner's head had vanished, the body slumped against the wall, like a puppet with its strings cut. The comms went static. Echo 7 raised his rifle. Contact. Visual confirmation. He didn't finish. A gauntlet cracked his visor inward, and a blade burst through his throat. John Killian stood in the middle of the tunnel, drenched in shadow and blood, his armor hissing as it bled off heat. His eyes scanned the darkness. For down. One remained. He didn't speak. Just moved. The last phantom tried to flee. He never reached the stairs. When it was over, Killian stood among the bodies, his breath slow and measured. Varn emerged from the side tunnel, face grim, gun still drawn. "You always did have a flair for timing," he said. "You always did lack perimeter discipline," Killian replied without looking. They stared at each other for a long moment, two men carved by war, now bound again by necessity. "She's alive?" Killian asked. "Barely, but she's healing. She said your name." "She's not supposed to exist." Varn nodded. "Neither were we." They returned to the lower chamber together. Lyra stirred as Killian approached, her fingers twitching against the sheets. When her eyes opened, they found his face first, not the scarred soldier before her, but something else. Recognition bloomed. "You're real," she whispered. Killian knelt beside her, voice low. "They tried to end you. They failed. You came." "I always do." Varn stood behind them, silent but watchful. There was something strange about the girl's presence, something deeper than her genetic structure. She calmed Killian in a way no one else had. He had seen the Boogeyman tear through entire battalions. But now, he looked almost human. "She's not just a clone," Varn said quietly. "She's something new. An echo of you, but also more." Killian's jaw tightened. "And they'll never stop coming for her." "No," Varn agreed. "Which is why we can't keep running." Killian rose. "Who's still alive from the Accord?" "Only one I trust, Marcus Haynes. He runs a Rebel Cell 2 systems over. Last I heard, he's still operating from the forge rings in the Velner cluster." Killian didn't answer right away. Marcus Haynes had once led the unit that abandoned Killian during the siege of Pyros. The betrayal had nearly cost them the war. Old grudges burned deep. But Lyra had no time for grudges. "Send a signal," he said. "Tell him the war's not over." Hours later, under the veil of night, the Obsidian Hound lifted off from Drexen 4, leaving only ashes and twisted metal behind. Inside, Varn worked to stabilize Lyra, while Killian stared at the NAV screen, watching the stars drift by. He didn't like relying on Haynes, but their options were few. The data Varn recovered from a Phantom's neural net confirmed it. Project Ghostfire hadn't ended. It had been perfected. The Empire planned to use Lyra's genome to create an entire generation of engineered operatives, Killian's instincts without his conscience. Weapons without will. They couldn't allow it. As the ship entered hyperspace, Killian sat beside Lyra's sleeping form, his hand resting lightly on her wrist. She didn't know what she was yet, but he did. She wasn't just his legacy. She was his redemption. And if the Empire wanted her back, they were going to have to go through hell to get her. The forge rings hung in orbit like rusted halos, relics of a forgotten age where Terran ingenuity once rivaled Imperial arrogance. Now they serve a different purpose: refuge, rebellion, and ruin. Inside the central ring, flickering lights cast skeletal shadows through the corridors, where steel and silence shared the same voice. John Killian stepped off the ramp of the Obsidian Hound in full armor, his presence like a drawn blade. The Terran rebels watching from a platform stiffened, unsure whether to salute or shoot. They did neither. Word had already spread: Killian was real. And he'd brought something the Empire feared more than death: proof. Marcus Haynes emerged from the operations room, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, wearing rebellion like an old, fraying uniform. His face carried years of guilt behind a practice calm, but the moment he saw Killian, his voice dropped to steel. You've got some nerve showing up here. Killian didn't blink. I brought the war with me. Thought you'd appreciate the courtesy. Behind him, Elias Varn helped Lyra down the ramp. Her steps were unsteady, but her eyes held a clarity that hadn't been there days ago. She wore a reinforced vest, too big for her frame, but moved with quiet determination. Haynes' gaze flicked to her, brows furrowed. She's the one. She's the one, Killian said. The Empire's next blueprint. They kill her, they own the future. Haynes looked between them, then finally nodded. Come inside. The meeting room smelled of dust and dying circuits. Holomaps blinked, showing Imperial fleet routes, skirmish zones, and territories on the brink of collapse. Killian leaned over the central console and pulled up the encrypted files Varn had extracted from a Phantom unit. A series of incomplete genome sequences, AI command patterns, and one unmistakable name across the top. Project Ghostfire, Phase Omega. They're not just cloning, Killian said. They're learning. Each failed experiment leads them closer to something worse. Killian, without morality. Lyra is the last uncontaminated source. They'll rip her apart to get it right. Haynes exhaled, jaw tight. So what's the plan? Fort Zenith, Killian replied. That's where they're centralizing the research now. Full lockdown. AI-run defense grid. Ghostfire command core buried deep. Haynes stared at the display for a long moment. You want to hit an Imperial fortress guarded by a kill-switch AI and an entire company of enhanced troopers. Killian didn't hesitate. Yes. It's suicide. Killian's voice dropped. It's necessary. Lyra stepped forward. You don't have to come. But I do. Haynes studied her. You're just a kid. I'm more than that, she said. And if I die, they win. So I'm not going to die. That silenced the room. Hours later, beneath the dying light of a collapsing star, the strike team dropped into Zenith's lower atmosphere, cloaked in ion static. The fortress loomed like a blade buried in the earth, bristling with turrets and anti-air batteries, but they slipped through undetected, riding the electromagnetic blind spots mapped by Killian himself during the last Terran assault years ago. The landing was rough. Varn dislocated a shoulder. Haynes cracked a rib. But they moved fast. Lyra, guided by the neural codes imprinted in her DNA, led them through hidden access conduits, old servant tunnels forgotten by time, and maintenance droids. They bypassed 3 checkpoints and 2 gun nests before reaching the core compound. Killian halted at a security door. Once this opens, he said, they'll know we're here. Haynes nodded grimly. Then we finish it fast. They breached. Alarms howled. Sirens flared to life. Automated turrets snapped into place. Empire troopers swarmed from side chambers like ants from a wounded hive. Killian moved first. He was a phantom in motion, rifle bursting with suppressed fire, blade flickering like lightning. He weaved through gunfire, every motion deliberate, every kill clean. The Boogeyman was real again, and the Empire bled for it. Varn kept to cover, lobbing EMP charges to cripple droids and disable turrets. Haynes fought like a man unburdened, striking down enemies with brutal precision, redemption bleeding from every wound he carved. But it was Lyra who led them forward. In the heart of the fortress, the Ghostfire AI activated, a humanoid intelligence formed from millions of stolen neural echoes. It appeared in the chamber's center, a shimmering construct of light and data, its voice void of emotion. You are obsolete, it said, studying Killian. You are flesh. Error. Corruption. Killian didn't reply. He raised his weapon, but before he fired, Lyra stepped forward. Deactivate, she said firmly. You are not authorized, the AI replied. Yes, I am, she said, voice steady. I am phase 0. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the room dimmed. The AI stuttered. Killian realized what she had done. Her DNA, her neural code. It wasn't just a blueprint. It was a failsafe. The system obeyed. Alarms ceased. Turrets powered down. The AI flickered once, then disappeared. The silence that followed was immense. But victory demanded sacrifice. From the side corridor came heavy footsteps. Captain Rowan Blackwell, bloodied but unbroken, flanked by 2 enhanced enforcers. His eyes met Killian's, and the 2 men stepped into the center of the chamber without words. Haynes raised his rifle, but Killian stopped him. This one's mine. They fought. It was not elegant. It was primal. 2 titans who represented everything the other hated, order against chaos, empire against freedom, silence against defiance. Blackwell fought with the cold efficiency of a man who believed himself righteous. Killian fought like a dying star, burning, wild, unwilling to fade. In the end, it was a blade to the heart. Blackwell staggered, gasping, blood bubbling from his lips. "You were never a man," he whispered. "Just a myth." "And you," Killian replied, "were just another monster." Blackwell collapsed, but Killian didn't move. He dropped to one knee, hand pressed to his side. Blood spilled from between the plates of his armor. Deep. Mortal. Varn rushed to him, but Killian waved him off. Lyra knelt beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't go," she said. He smiled faintly. "I'm not going. I'm already gone." "You saved me." "No," he said, voice soft. **, save me." His hand closed around hers. And then he was still. In the days that followed, the files from Project Ghostfire were broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The Empire denied everything. The Terran Alliance was reborn in secret halls, fueled by evidence, hope, and the name of the man who'd haunted an empire into silence. Lyra stood before the Galactic Council weeks later, wearing the sigil of a world not yet free, but no longer alone. She spoke not as a soldier or as a weapon, but as a survivor. A child. A legacy. The Boogeyman was dead, but in his place, they had something stronger. A future. And this time it would not be afraid.